Good day. Welcome to the Great White North, or rather, it should be good evening. It will be getting quite dark. I'm in the forest this evening looking for small, cold-blooded subjects to photograph, and I'm using Laowa's new 90mm f2.8 macro lens. Slotted between their existing 85mm and 100mm macro lenses, this 90mm lens may have you scratching your head as to why three lenses with such similar focal lengths are necessary. And the simple answer is each lens offers something different. The 85mm and its f5.6 aperture is lightweight and easy to wield. The 100mm with its f2.8 aperture offers a bit more flexibility and a larger working distance. This 90mm lens is perfectly designed for modern mirrorless cameras. But what does that really mean? Featuring an optical design with 13 elements in 10 groups, like every Laowa lens that I've used, this 90mm has phenomenal image quality. Shooting wide open at f2.8, the center is tack sharp, but you may encounter a bit of softness in the corners as well as slight vignetting. Fortunately, that softness in the corners and the vignetting is resolved by f4. Stopping down to f5.6, image quality improves overall, and by f8, image quality reaches its peak. From f11 down to f22, diffraction takes hold and there's noticeable softness. This is not a fault of the manufacturer, it is physics. You'll find that with most macro lenses. Thanks to Laowa's apochromatic APO technology, this lens produces zero chromatic aberration or visible purple fringing. Bokeh is very pleasing. The 13 aperture blades create perfect circular bokeh balls. Those said circles do become rather oblong or lemon-esque at the edges where light fall off occurs. Weighing in at 619 grams and stretching 12 centimeters in length, this 90mm lens is only 19 grams lighter and half a centimeter shorter than Laowa's existing 100mm macro lens. Now, being only slightly smaller, it may be difficult to see how this lens is perfectly designed for mirrorless cameras. It is important not to overlook the obvious. Available in Sony E, Nikon Z, Canon RF, and Leica L mounts, Laowa has clearly accepted the future from most camera manufacturers is mirrorless. And having a native mirrorless mount eliminates the need for any adapter and the extra bulk they may include. One slight knock against this lens that might just come down to personal preference is the sheer percentage of the lens barrel occupied by the focus ring. Of the lens's 12 centimeter length, the focus ring stretches 7 centimeters. I found myself often accidentally moving focus while resting or steadying the lens against something, or even simply while composing a shot. Holding the lens with my left hand and gripping the camera with the right, I found it too easy to pivot or twist the camera around the focus ring. Of course, having said all that, it may just come down to having more time to acclimate to the lens and learning to hold it closer to the end of the barrel. It may seem silly to consider how a lens feels, but if it doesn't feel right in your hands, you're not going to enjoy using it. And this lens feels great. It features full metal construction that feels very solid and robust. The focus ring's textured metal surface provides enough grip to prevent the lens from slipping from your hands unwantedly. The lens cap works as expected. It can be both attached and removed without any extra attention required. And the lens hood is a lens hood. Like most of Laowa's lens lineup, this 90mm is a fully mechanical lens, meaning there's no electronic communication between it and a camera body. Using an older or traditional digital SLR with a fully mechanical lens meant your viewfinder would often be quite dark when composing, as the aperture is unable to open wide to allow for focusing and then automatically stop down to your selected value the moment you press the shutter button. Fortunately, the mirrorless modern cameras that this lens is perfectly designed for play quite nicely with such a lens. Upon first glance, your viewfinder or LCD screen may appear quite dark, but the moment you hold your shutter button halfway down or engage autofocus by any other means, your viewfinder becomes significantly brighter as your camera is trying its very best to focus. Unfortunately, the lack of electronic communication or coupling does reduce the effectiveness of most in-body image stabilization systems. Without knowing the focal length that it's working with, most stabilization systems can only guess, and the guesswork doesn't produce the best results. With a minimum focusing distance of 20.4 centimeters and its maximum magnification ratio of 2:1, this lens provides an average working distance for macro photography. Great for subjects that are cooperative, but maybe not so much for skittish subjects or those that are potentially harmful to yourself. If magnification ratio sounds like a foreign language to you, I would suggest heading over to my video Introduction to Macro Photography up there. The last Laowa lens that I shared with you was the 100mm f2.8 macro, and I was very critical of its exposed internal focusing design that would very easily, or all too easily, allow for foreign objects or moisture to enter the lens. Subsequently, it is fantastic to see that this 90mm now has a sealed internal focusing design. I say this as it really is a possibility when shooting macro imagery. All too often, a macro lens finds itself pressed firmly against the ground, being pushed forwards and backwards as you're trying to focus, not unlike a shovel. Is this a design perfect for a mirrorless camera or just a logical improvement? You can be the judge of that. There may be some who feel the lack of electronic communication and ultimately the lack of autofocus is a knock against this lens. However, for those who understand just how infrequently autofocus is used when photographing at high magnifications, whether a lens has autofocus or not makes little difference when photographing macro subjects. Another notable improvement over the Laowa 100mm macro lens is the focus throw. Moving from 2:1 magnification all the way to infinity is nearly 200 degrees of focus ring rotation. A larger focus throw is very beneficial when making small adjustments to focus at higher magnifications. The focus ring is incredibly smooth, almost to the point where it's just fun to play with. The aperture ring is what I would consider semi-declicked. Rotating you can feel when you've reached one of the marked values, but it's not such a significant click as to completely stop the rotation of the ring, allowing you to dial in any aperture value between the marked full stops. Comparing Laowa's new 90mm macro lens to the competition, it does hold its ground quite well. I would argue that the Canon RF 100mm comes close, as it's the only non-Laowa lens of similar focal length with a maximum magnification greater than 1:1, at 1.4:1, but its price tag is considerable. Canon's older EF 100mm is a superb lens and a reliable workhorse, but like the RF version, it's a little pricey. Laowa's very own 100mm macro lens has the same 2:1 magnification, and it's just as sharp. It really is the strongest competition. Both Nikon variants are strong contenders if you shoot Nikon, but they're stuck at that 1:1 magnification and they're still a little pricey. Pentax gets an obligatory mention solely because they produce a 100mm macro lens. Rokinon is a little more affordable, but they're not available in a wide selection of modern mirrorless mounts, and again, stuck at that 1:1 magnification ratio. Sigma is a strong contender. Its price point is a little more digestible. Again, limited mirrorless mounts and stuck at 1:1 magnification. Sony is great if you shoot Sony. Tokina wins the lowest price point, but like the Rokinon and Sigma, limited mirrorless mount options and stuck at 1:1 magnification. All in all, with 2x magnification and affordable price point, this Laowa 90mm really is an attractive macro lens. Looking through the competition, I do feel it's important to strongly emphasize how the majority of macro lenses of similar focal length are unable to exceed 1:1 magnification. Not that shooting at 1:1 isn't fun, but when you move beyond life size and begin revealing aspects of a subject normally not visible to the unaided eye, that's when high magnification macro photography becomes incredibly rewarding. For example, at 16mm we have Pisaster ocraceus, or an ochre sea star. Its magnification right now is probably less than 0.1:1, but if we increase that to 2:1, suddenly you can see tiny pedicelaria. The small little claw-like features on a stalk. These would be incredibly difficult to highlight at 1:1 magnification and obviously invisible to the unaided eye. To wrap things up, it's difficult to say definitively that this lens is perfectly designed for a mirrorless camera, but I would argue that it is incredibly well designed for a mirrorless camera. And if you're a photographer who's made the jump to a mirrorless system and you're looking for a macro lens that punches high above its price point, this might well be the lens you're looking for. If you're a photographer who has a 100mm macro lens and you're looking to explore magnifications greater than 1:1, this also might be a lens to consider. If you're a photographer who has Laowa's 100mm macro lens and you're debating whether this 90mm lens is worth the upgrade, that is a difficult question and one that ultimately only you can answer. With that, I would like to thank Laowa for letting me borrow this lens. As always, being able to play with it for a few weeks came with no strings attached. Everything I've just shared with you has been my own opinion. I'd also like to thank you for watching. If you have liked this video, click like. If you have a question or a comment, put it down below. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.